Hello fellow bookners, welcome to another reading vlog. This month is very exciting because we're going to be reading translated books. Like I said, this month's reading vlog theme is translated books, and this vlog's edition is East Asia because I'm hoping to do more. So yeah, it's gonna be all translated works. I really don't read any translated works at all, and watching, I think it was Nicole that was really talking about a lot of translated books, and it really made me think, I wanna read some translated works, and there were a couple that were on my radar, so I'm super excited. We're starting with East Asia because I already had some books that I bought that I was so excited to read, so I thought, why not start with that? We have 3 books. So the first one is The Diary of the Murderer by Kim Young-ha, and this one is by a South Korean author. I know this is like a thriller where the main character is a retired serial killer, but when his daughter gets a new boyfriend, I think he goes back to serial killing because he's like, that guy's fishy, something like that. I'm super excited. Have not read anything similar to that, and I'm kind of craving a little break from fantasy because I've been reading a lot of it, so I think this one's going to be the first one I'm going to be reading, and I'm so excited. The next book we have is The Memory Police by Yoko Ogawa, and this is actually a Japanese author, and the book was originally in Japanese, and I don't really know what this is about, but I think it's like a sci-fi where they steal your memories or police your memories, I'm not sure. And the last book is A Hero Born. So this one is by a Chinese author. I think this one's pitched at like Chinese Game of Thrones, although they call everything Game of Thrones, so what does that even mean? But you know, I decided to give it a go. It looked really fun. I think was it that Nicole in her books that actually read it and said that it was a little bit like hard to get through and very different type of fantasy, and I'm really looking forward to a very different type of fantasy because I do read predominantly, you know, like YA fantasy or adult fantasy, but majority by Western authors. Even if it's by author of a different ethnicity, often they speak English. The language that the book was written in is English, so I think it's going to be amazing experiencing a translated work from an author from that, like living in that culture permanently and writing in that language. I'm Polish, if you don't know, so actually for majority of my life, I would say till I was maybe 16, 17, I exclusively read translated books because I only spoke Polish. So every book that I read, well, if I read a Polish book that wasn't translated, but every other book I read was translated to Polish, and it was definitely an interesting experience having learned English almost like fluently and then reading books in English and then sometimes reading the same book translated and in original language. It was definitely a very eye-opening experience as to how much you sometimes can lose reading translated books. I think translating books is amazing. We should be able to experience books from many different cultures, but there's certain language and cultural signifiers that can get lost in translation. Well, I don't speak Japanese, Mandarin, or Korean, so we're not going to be able to compare, but I'm still curious to see if I'm going to love them. I've heard really amazing things about all of these books, so I'm hoping I will. I've not started any of them. This is just the intro, but I will get back to you when I have an update. And like I said, we're starting with The Diary of the Murderer. But I'm actually halfway through The Diary of a Murderer. This is a very quick book. So let me actually give you a synopsis now that I kind of know what it's about. So in this book we follow the main character who indeed used to be a serial killer. So he hasn't killed anyone in like 26 years and he decided one day to just retire. But when his daughter starts dating this guy that he thinks is a serial killer, does not believe in the guy at all, he decides that his one last murder will be this guy that his daughter's dating. Now that's basically it. But there's an added element because he is diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease at the very beginning of the book. And the first bit that I read, literally, like I just stopped. It changed a little bit now, this much. Basically, the first half of this book is just literally his diary and his stream of consciousness. So because he forgets everything, he writes it down in his diary and he records himself because of the Alzheimer's, and it's just him going down this rabbit hole of trying to like keep his memories, keep an eye on the target, aka killing this man, and just like kind of reminiscing about his life and like the murders he committed, kind of why he did it, and his daughter and that kind of thing. So we kind of just spiral from there. It seems to have changed a little bit during the second half, but I don't actually know what's in store for me yet, so we'll see how that's going. So far I'm enjoying it. It's definitely so different than anything else I ever read. Like, this is, how would I describe this? It's kind of like a thriller, I guess, but it's definitely a different thriller than you are used to. It has 1000%, it has an unreliable narrator, because obviously the main character, he has Alzheimer's, his memory is like coming and going, and he's definitely confused a lot of the times, and we don't really hear from anyone else, at least so far. So it's very clear that we can't really trust what he's saying, and he's also really confused and trying to like work out through what's happening with us. So yeah, I would kind of call it a thriller, kind of like suspense novel maybe. It's really easy to read, it's very fast, it's well translated in the sense that the prose flows well and we understand the story. It's good, well written. I don't know if it's well translated because obviously I don't speak South Korean, but it's definitely well written in the translation. The main character is very compelling while also being unlikable to an extent. So of course, because he's a serial killer and he doesn't really have like a reason, he just wants to do it, so he did it. Like that was his thing, and that's awful, and like I don't want to support him, but because we're in his head and we know he's sick and we see him being confused and going down these like routes, and you feel so bad for him and kind of want him to like come out on top in the end, because you think that this guy that the daughter's dating is kind of a douche and very suspicious. At the same time, is he? Because he has Alzheimer's, can we even believe anything he's saying? So it's definitely compelling character study in that sense, just like being in the head of this murderer that we kind of are compelled to like. It's kind of like you follow Dexter in the Dexter TV show. Like, of course, he's an awful person. He's a serial killer. He murders people. But he has a code. Okay, he has a code, so it's different. The guy doesn't seem to have much of a code. Because you're in his perspective, you do want to kind of root for him and you get where he's coming from. So far, I'm really intrigued, really interesting where it's going, because I feel like there are twists coming. Maybe I'm looking at this a little bit too much like it's a thriller, but I feel like there are twists coming because that's the vibe I'm getting. So we'll see where that takes us. Okay, so it's day later and I finished this, but everything I told you was basically a lie and so inaccurate. So the story that I told you about the serial killer who stops killing, it's true, and that's the main story that takes up about half of this book. But actually it's a collection of short stories, which I didn't realize. So that first part that I was like, oh, I wonder where it's gonna go, well, that actually finished on the halfway point. And then we have 3 more stories that are just like unconnected, at least as far as I can tell. They're just unconnected short stories. In that sense, I don't know if it counts as a thriller. It's probably not traditional kind of thriller, maybe like a mystery suspense, but definitely not like a traditional thriller. And yeah, it's important to know that this is a short story collection. But even though that surprised me, although I probably shouldn't be surprised since it says The Diary of a Murderer and Other Stories. I was wondering why that was. Actually, she was like, I wonder why and Other Stories is part of the title. When I tell you I'm a dumbass. I actually enjoyed every single story in this. I thought all of them were very compelling, very interesting written, following very questionable characters, compelling at the same time. Most of them were unlikable, most of them had something really weird or messed up happen to them, but they were very compelling. I think the first story was the most engaging just because it had the most room to breathe, and that's the story I was really sold on. I really thought it would be more like, I thought it was a full-length novel, so I was expecting it to have like traditional plot structure, traditional character arcs and all of that, but it was really good for what it was. I just kind of wish it was a full story. The next story was The Origin of Life, which is probably my least favorite. Not that I hated it or anything, but it was just that's when I was realizing that it's a short story collection. Then we had The Missing Child, which I found really unsettling and strange, but weirdly like hopeful at the end. And really enjoyed. Then The Writer I was really enjoying, and then it got really weird. It was weird, then it got weirder, and then it was just like, what's even happening? I feel like I need someone to sit down and explain it to me. So that's how I feel about that. Overall, I did enjoy it. I was kind of torn on my rating because it was just so far out of what I normally read, but I gave it 3.5 stars and 3 stars on Goodreads because I think it was a really good read. I was very engaged, but it was also super short and I feel like a tiny bit confusing, maybe. Yeah, overall I would really recommend this though if you like weird suspense, kind of surreal stories. I mean, none of them are surreal. It's not really magic or anything in it, but it's just that weird sense of what the hell did I just read? This will give it to you. I don't know if this is just me imagining things, but I used to be really into Korean shows and dramas and music. So I tried to learn Korean for a bit as well. I'm quite familiar with the structure, how Korean language is spoken as opposed to English, and how the translation, when you watch dramas, how the translation comes out to be translated, and sometimes it sounds a bit weird because the sentence structure is just different, and I definitely felt that here, not in a bad way, just it felt like I was kind of watching a Korean drama subtitles, because the sentence was very short, very direct, felt a little unnatural, as if this were set in England or UK or America, whatever English-speaking country. I mean, it was translated for Korean, and I think it really translated its cultural origin well. So I actually thought that was really well done. I am so happy because it's day 3 of May, and I already finished this book in 2 days. I'm super happy about this because my last reading month wasn't amazing. So I'm hoping, starting strong will help us kick off an amazing month. I'm thinking I'm gonna read A Hero Born next. I'm thinking if I get a fantasy now and then I finish up with Memory Palace, which is not high fantasy, then the rest of my month, which is almost exclusively fantasy, I will be having an easier time getting through rather than doing Memory Palace now and then having all these fantasies in a row. So that's the plan. I'll update you once I actually start the book. Well, hello. Time to talk about book number 2, which is A Hero Born. I'm gonna do this while doing my makeup. I hope you don't mind. We're short on time. Things are happening, okay? And I've never done this before, so I'm no makeup guru, don't judge me, okay? A Hero Born. So this is originally a Chinese novel. I think I told you this. But the thing with this one is it's existed for quite a while. It was quite popular for a long time with Chinese audiences, but it was never translated because it was kind of considered beyond translating. I think I might have said it was like Chinese Game of Thrones, and that's totally not what they're saying. I'm pretty sure they're saying that it's a Chinese Lord of the Rings. And eventually, many years after its publication, they decided to translate it after all. So this is quite an interesting series because I'm pretty sure the foreword said it's 12 books, and they're basically going from before Genghis Khan was Genghis Khan. So he exists, but his name's different and he's just getting into power. So it starts from before that, and the last book, I think in a trilogy, but it might be the whole series, is about his grandson. The time of his grandson. It's not exactly about him, but it's from that time. That means that this book spans over a lot of years. So I'm not expecting, and I knew this because I watched Nicole and her books vlog. So I watched her vlog and she said that it takes place over many years and doesn't really follow one character, and that's very true. I'm about 38% into it, and it's already been 6 years at least since the book's kicked off. So that's something to be aware of. If you really like following one character intimately and following their story, this is not the book for you. It's very different than anything I'm used to. This is a wuxia, I think you say, fantasy, which means that it's a martial arts fantasy. So kung fu is a really big part of it. There will not be a chapter without a fight in it, at least one fight, but the chapter is about 40 minutes. It takes me 40 minutes to read one chapter. They're enormous. So because of that, there's at least 2, 3, 4 fights per chapter. Every 2 minutes there will be a fight scene, and I'm not usually that big on fight scenes, and I'm not gonna say that I enjoy love to death these fight scenes. I could do without them, but it definitely is the vibe of the story. The story is really grand. The story is very larger than life, and I think that's portrayed pretty well. I actually do have those vibes. I definitely got the vibes of like, this is larger than life, honor is everything, that kind of thing, right? So I think it did well, that, if that's what it set out to do. Maybe let me tell you a little bit about what it was about first. So actually there's a foreword, like I said, and it's by the translator. It kind of tells you literally what you're gonna read about. And when I read that, I just could not focus. I was like, I don't understand anything you're saying to me right now. What the hell? So I actually read a little bit of the book, maybe about 20-30%, and then once I knew a little bit about what the hell was happening, I went back and read the foreword again, and I was like, oh, okay, it all kind of makes sense now. I understand what you're saying. So I would actually recommend doing that. Maybe if you didn't get the foreword, like you don't understand what it's about. As far as I've gotten, which is 40% in, we follow a story of this Taoist or a monk. He's a very mysterious figure, but very well known in the martial arts world. He's known to be like the best kung fu person ever. Someday he's running from something. It was very confusing. And then he chances upon this house with these two houses with two families, and he ends up fighting with the patriarchs of the family. But then once they sit down, they're like, oh wait, we're kind of from the same nation and we like both patriots, so we shouldn't be fighting. And that's how that goes. And the guy's like, oh wow, both of your wives are pregnant. And these two guys are like best friends. They grew up together, like always really good friends. Oh, your wives are pregnant. You should name your kids this and this. Thank you so much for like giving me food. It was awesome. Let's hang out sometime. Maybe. And then he gets like chanced upon by these soldiers for some reason, and he fights the soldiers and like a bunch of them die. And then one of the soldiers, the wife of one of the men, finds him alive and she nurses him back to health. And then he just goes away for a bit, and then like a whole army comes back and they're like, you two, the two men that like took in the Taoist monk and became friends with him, they are accused of being traitors, and they're like, we're gonna murder all of you. So they escaped with their wives, but the men get killed and the wives kind of just end up running away. So the monk hears about it, the Taoist hears about it, and he's like, oh my god, this is my fault, basically, because the soldiers were looking for this Taoist monk, but they found these two guys instead. So he's like, oh well, this is my fault, I need to fix it. So he like devotes his life to finding the sons and like raising them to be able to like avenge their fathers and stuff. So I know that my explanation probably sounds absolutely bonkers and like you don't really know what's happening, but it's that kind of story. I don't know how to explain it. It's very different, very, very different from like Western fantasy and anything that I'm used to. But at the same time, because I watched like a very good amount of K-dramas and a good amount of C-drama, like couple C-dramas, it just feels like I understand what the cultural nuance there is, and I also can appreciate the skill of the translator, because it's really tries to translate away the like honorifics, for example, and a lot of Asian languages, or like, okay, maybe Chinese and Korean, those are the ones I know. For example, each of your sibling will have like a name that also kind of is their titles. For example, third brother, fourth brother, second sister, like you know how much older they are and that kind of thing. So that's really well portrayed. It's definitely feels maybe a bit unnatural because we don't speak like this in English, but knowing what I know about the cultural background and that kind of thing, and where it's coming from, what it might sound like in actual Mandarin, sounds very accurate to me. I think the translator did a very good job. I'm actually incredibly enjoying this. I could not put it down, and I was really absorbed in the story, really enjoying it. I'm the kind of person that loves historical K-dramas. For example, Empress Key, I really like that one. I like how they take real historical figures a lot of the time, and then they add these stories to them. And this one's very similar to that in concept, because we have Genghis Khan and we have other like real historical figures that I don't really know anything about, but maybe if you're from that culture you will know. So taking them, real people, and like adding onto their stories and giving these side characters a little bit more to do. And it's very Asian in that sense, that the honor and that kind of martial arts and just like, I guess patriarchy to a sense, but like honor of a warrior is very important, and I enjoy it. I think if you enjoy K-dramas, but not just any K-drama, historical K-drama, you will probably enjoy this. I really do think so. So far, like I said, only 40% in, and I was mentally prepared not to follow the same characters, for it to be very different than what I'm used to, and all that good jazz. So maybe if you go into it thinking what I'm thinking, you might also enjoy it. So far, like I said, really enjoying it. Sometimes don't know what's happening because it's just starting fighting out of nowhere, and I'm just like, why are we fighting? And then the next second they'll be like drinking together. There was this whole like drinking contest. It's wild. It's absolutely wild. This does not have like the realism. Realism is very loose term in this book. It's definitely like wild. What's happening is just like you're like, but it's very true to like that grandiose style of storytelling when you even think about Tolkien, and it's very grand. It has a lot of songs. It's a bit dramatic, you know, the like friendship's very important. So, you know, I really get the Fellowship of the Ring comparison, and I actually quite agree. And I don't know, so far I'm enjoying it. I'm gonna catch up with you when I read a little bit more. I am now about 68% in, and I'm still really enjoying it. I don't know what it is. I didn't think I'd love it. I am a bit picky, and I think maybe if everything I read like this I wouldn't enjoy as much, but then of course I wouldn't read it if this was everything I read. But it's so different than what I'm used to from fantasies, and it's really epic, and I love it has this quality about the characters, you know, like kind of like Sword of Kaigen or the Order of the Moon Reflected in Water, where like the characters are really like archetypes and they're bigger than themselves. So it's not really about their individual feelings but what they represent. And I really enjoy that. I really like hanging out with like real historical figures like Genghis Khan. I really like that aspect. I guess the thing that I least like about it, but also I'm not that bothered, is how long the chapters are. It takes about an hour to read each chapter. It does have like sub chapters, I guess. But that means once I finish a chapter, I don't start the next one unless I know I have an hour to spare, because I'd rather just, well, I have probably not read one of these chapters in one go. I just need to take breaks because this book is more like heavily involved in your mind, and it's not like very easy to completely understand what's happening, so you gotta pay attention. So I definitely not read one chapter in a go, and it also still kind of prevents me from starting new chapters sometimes, but I kind of go over it and just fine with leaving the chapter mid-end, because an hour for one chapter is long. So that's my only complaint, I guess. I don't prefer it. I prefer short chapters because then I can be like, oh, just one more, and then I could end up finishing the book somehow. But the book is very good. It's so well written. I really like how it's translated. I think it just translates the culture and the language so well. I love the themes of it. I'm really curious where it's gonna go. Like I said, I love seeing real figures, because I don't know, I like humanizing them in this way. The span of the book so far has been 18 years. Obviously we don't hang out in every year, but we hang out like at the beginning of the story, then maybe 6 years after that, 16 years from beginning of the story, now 18 years from the beginning. And I still have 3 chapters left, which is about 2.5 hours. Like I said, 67% in, and I'm excited where it's gonna take us. I definitely think if you're not a fan of fight scenes, like I said, every other page there's a fight scene, and it's very ridiculous, but in a good way. Okay, so I finished A Hero Born, and I really enjoyed it. I gave it 4.5 stars because I don't think it's for me like quite the 5-star, because 5 stars, like, I don't know, it has this je ne sais quoi about it, but 4.5 is extremely solid. I really loved it. Yeah, I think that's safe to say. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was really different than from what I'm used to. I thought the story was compelling, but I think the reason it's not quite 5 stars is because it's the type of storytelling where it's really hard to get attached to characters. I still cared about them, I guess, but if third person feels like a degree of separation, this was like 3 degrees of separation. I don't know how to explain it. It's just like we're not really in character's head almost at all, and we're mainly just describe the events that are happening, which was fine. Like, I really still enjoyed what was happening. But not being in character's head does impact how much I'm going to be involved and care about this character. There was a little bit of romance introduced, and again, like, just I don't really care. But it's not really a story about that. It's like, that's not what the story is there for. It's here to tell an epic like adventure of honor and to talk to you about martial arts. And it definitely does that. There's martial arts non-stop. If you feel like maybe you are into that kind of epic storytelling where it's not like about getting to know your characters but more about the story being told, if you like honorable characters, if you like martial arts or fighting, I think all of these reasons should be your reasons to pick up A Hero Born. I was really pleasantly surprised how much I liked it. Okay, that's us done with Hero Born. Goodbye that, and we're in with a new book. And that new book is The Memory Police by Yoko Ogawa. So this book, I first heard of it, I was like, yes please. I saw the cover, I fell in love. I thought it would be it for me. It'd be like one of the most amazing things I've ever read, right? And then my best friend read it and she was like, I really hated it. I think they did nothing interesting with the concept and I was disappointed. So I learned to temper my expectations. And you might be like, what is the concept? So before I got into this book, all I knew it was something like they were taking people's memories away and making memories disappear. That's all I knew. And for some reason, I thought this would be like a sci-fi, like a thrilling sci-fi, and it still might be, I don't know. That's definitely not the vibe so far. Actually, what this book is about, because I'm 40 pages into it, so it's not like a lot, but roughly. We live on this island, well, they call it the island. Anyway, the main character is a girl. She lives by herself because both of her parents died over the years and now she just lives by herself. But this island that she lives on, once every couple days, months, whatever, out of the blue, something will disappear. And the way something disappears, it's not that it disappears from it. I'm still trying to wrap my head around this, bear in mind. It's not that it disappears from existence, because it still exists. It's just people's memories and people's attachment to it disappears. So, for example, all the birds disappear, and the birds are still there, but like people don't really recognize the breeds anymore. Like our main character's father was an ornithologist, so birds have always been very close to the main character's heart and they always remind her of her dad. But because they disappeared, it doesn't really mean to her anything anymore. Like she sees the birds but she's not like bothered about them. And then, for example, people who kept birds in like cages and like as pets, they just release them because they literally have no attachment to the birds. But like the thing still exists. That's why I'm trying to like wrap my head around. Then there's some people who this disappearing thing doesn't work on, like our main character's mother. And she actually can remember everything and like remember her emotions connected to it, what it was, like what the purpose of it was, that kind of thing. And then we have this group called the Memory Police, and the Memory Police are basically like police that enforces the disappearances. So for example, they came to our main character's house and cleaned out her father's office because it was full of like paperwork around birds and like, you know, just like research and stuff. So that they get rid of this and destroy it. And then they started raiding houses of people who can remember and taking the people who can remember away. And we don't know what they do with people that they take away. So literally that's the first 40 pages of this book. That's as far as I got. I must say the writing style it feels the least translated, if that makes sense. I feel like both Diary of a Murderer and the Hero Born, I feel like the translation accurately portrayed the language, the original language. So in Korea, like it felt like Korean but in English, you know, like a very direct translation. And then in Hero Born, there was a lot of things like the flying tiger's paw. That was like a move in Kung Fu. And they literally translated it literally. And it did feel a little bit like a translation. Not in a bad way. Neither of these in a bad way. It just felt authentic because it felt like it was translated very literally. I've never watched that many Japanese dramas, maybe only like one or two. So I don't know if I know the cadence of the speech enough to be like, oh yeah, this feels different. But it does feel less translated, not in a bad or a good way. It's like a neutral way that I noticed. This book is so far very slow and we're just kind of hanging out with the main character. She's a writer as well, and I don't actually know what that proper plot will be and when it's gonna kick off. It hasn't happened yet, but I literally just started it last night, so I wasn't expecting it to like jump into the plot. So I don't know if this is gonna turn out to be more like a sci-fi thriller or if this is gonna be one of those very slow, thought-provoking books. I don't know, but I'm excited to find out. So I know I was just saying this doesn't feel like it's translated, but this line just came up and like, what the hell. The lighthouse of my childhood had long ago ceased to give off light, and no adult ventured to visit it. The spit of land on which it stood was overgrown with sharp reeds, and walking to it meant risking scratches on your legs. I went with an older cousin who licked my cuts one by one. And then we just move on? No, I'm sorry, we don't just move on. What? I was just thinking to myself, don't do it, just don't do it. And no, this book, of course cheating had to be involved. Well, now I don't like anyone involved, so there you go. I finished The Memory Police, and my feelings are complicated. So I did end up enjoying it, although I did end up kind of enjoying it, I guess. Although it ended up being way different than my expectations. I told you that I thought it was like some kind of sci-fi, and I guess it is. Like, it's a dystopian, but it's not like Hunger Games. You know what I mean? It's more of a, I don't even know what to compare this to. It's just like a very quiet kind of book where it's more about the message and symbolism rather than the actual story being told. I told you my best friend said that she felt like the concept was kind of wasted and they could have done it so much more with it. And I agree, because they did kind of barely anything with the whole memory police and the memories disappearing. Like, it was the point, but it really wasn't. Like, it wasn't about that, you know? It was more about like existential crisis and existing, like losing your voice and losing your agency. And it was interesting. Like, I wasn't bored reading this, but it's just not my type of story normally. Like, I do like quiet and thought-provoking books, so I don't know. Well, yeah, so I don't know what didn't work here, because I do like it, but maybe this one was just a little bit, I just had wrong expectations, and I did temper my expectations already, because when I bought this, my expectations were like through the roof, so high. I thought this would be like this most amazing, like really thought-provoking but really engaging, thrilling adventure story in like a sci-fi setting. I don't know why I thought that. I don't even know what I heard about this book to make me think that. This feels more like literary fiction, not as much as sci-fi to me. And I don't read literary fiction because it's just not something that I'm interested in. But like I said, what if you come into this thinking, okay, it's like a literary fiction, it's a dystopian, but like a very thought-provoking dystopian rather than fast-paced. It's not an adventure. It's not about the concept. It's more about what it represents. Then you'll probably enjoy it. If that's your kind of, if anything I just said sounds like, oh, that sounds really good, then you probably enjoy this book. You probably will. I was a bit disappointed. I really wanted something completely different from it, but that's not the book's fault. That's kind of my fault, but not really. It's just like, it is what it is, right? As for the book itself, so we end up, you know, I read you that weird passage, so it actually ended up being from the protagonist's book. So like I said, she's a novelist, so she's writing a book, and this is kind of story where you have a book within a book. So we have the main story, and then we also follow her novel and what she's writing, and it doesn't really end up being a big plot point in a sense, but it becomes a big theme tie-in, I guess. I don't know. It just kind of felt like the author wanted to tell two different stories and then they ended up just putting it here. I don't know. Maybe I'm just not smart enough for this book. That's probably what it is. The writing was beautiful. I did enjoy the conversations about like losing your agency and losing your voice, and it was quite heartbreaking in the end. But the thing is, I did not care about any that's not true. I cared about two beings in this: the old man, who's like a family friend, and the dog. And there were only 4 characters really, so I didn't care about half of them. Like, the main character, couldn't care less. Then there's her editor, who's like another main character. Don't care about him. I loved the old man. Yeah, he was a good character, but we don't really get his perspective or anything. We just see him through the main character's eyes, so it was limited. And then the dog was cute, but I only came in towards the end. Yeah, I think that made me not really care about the ending. It was kind of cool. Don't care. Like there were points where I cared, because something was happening to the people I actually connected to on any level. But I don't think the main character had enough personality for me to connect to. She was literally just a blank slate, going and doing chores and just telling us about the chores. I don't know, I didn't feel like she was a real person. And I guess it kind of makes sense because they talk about the losing their memories, kind of like making hole in their hearts and taking away their souls. So it made sense. Doesn't mean I have to like it or care. And because there was no plot here, basically, it was just kind of like living this dystopian world and that was it. There was not much for me to care about. It was alright, but it didn't blow my mind. That's why I give it 3 stars. I think it's fair because I didn't slate it for being not what I wanted it to be, but I didn't also elevate it because it's like deep. You know what I mean? Like, it's deep, I guess, but it's like didn't stir anything within me. So that marks the end of the vlog. I really enjoyed reading these books. I think it was really cool to read something from a different culture, in a different language. I really liked seeing like the translation. It's definitely a fun experience reading books in English that were originally in English, because I told you that I used to read books in Polish which were translated from English, so English always seemed like the default. Let me know what region I guess you'd like me to do next. I really don't know what translated books I want to read from what region of the world, so I don't know, let me know where you're from and maybe that's how I can decide. Yeah, let me know where you're from, what country you're from, and hopefully I can find some books that are from that country, or if you have a recommendation and that book's translated into English, please put it down below. I'd love to hear your input. That would really really make me happy. But otherwise, that's probably it from this vlog. Thank you so much for watching. If you could like, comment and subscribe, I'd really appreciate it. But that's it for me, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!